In concrete description, doctoral studies is in France, of course, because it's Europe and the Bologna process. It's very similar to what it's like in Georgia. Usually, the PhD is done in 3 years. Of course, it can sometimes exceed, but it's not too often the case because, for one reason, most of the time the funding for the PhD is limited to 3 years. So that's a good incentive to complete the PhD in 3 years. Also about the system, yes, the bachelor studies in France are 3 years. So actually, when you enter PhD in France, it's after 5 years of studies, minimum. Of course, you are of course allowed to have more qualifications. Also, one thing that I wanted to also stress, and I think that our colleagues from Rennes will also, in concrete details, show you that being a PhD student in France is a full-time engagement. It is not something that you do next to a job like it can be the case in Georgia. This is actually a full-time job. And it consists mainly of your own research activities. So it actually asks you to be quite independent. Of course, you're supervised, but you have to produce your own knowledge. This is really the goal of the PhD studies. Therefore, there is, compared to Georgia, when you are in doctoral schools, there are much less lectures in doctoral schools. There is much more concrete trainings about methodology, but you will be, throughout the 3 years of PhD, you will be really actively producing your own knowledge. Oops. So about doctoral schools, in general, doctoral schools are actually, there are a few different doctoral schools that are affiliated with either one university or a regroupment of universities. It is often the case, notably in Rennes, and our colleagues from Rennes will show you that sometimes in some French regions, a few universities within the same city or region actually regroup their capacities to have their regrouped doctoral schools that are for each, I would say, field of studies. And within those doctoral schools, usually you have different labs that are even more specialized. This is a mock exam, a mock example. I don't know if this thing actually exists in the reality, but this is in general the logic of where you are when you are a doctoral student. You are in the doctoral school that belongs to one or different universities. And the doctoral school is the unit that will actually monitor your PhD progress from A to Z, from the enrollment to the funding to the progress of the PhD tracks, also providing the trainings until the defense of the thesis. When it comes to finding your PhD offer, there are two different styles in France, depending if you're involved in the field of exact and natural science and what we call social sciences in France. It's humanities and social sciences with economics as well. So this is the general trend. Of course, there are some exceptions, but when you're involved in exact and natural sciences, you usually apply directly to a research offer that is proposed by a supervisor, by a professor. And when it is the case, it usually means that this offer is already funded because the university has got a funding for this project, and therefore they open a position for a PhD candidate. Which is an advantage, but also it means that you have to engage in the research that is already chosen for you. Of course, if you have your own financing and scholarship, you can also get a bit emancipated from this scheme and research on your own topic. When it comes to social sciences and humanities, you actually have to do a more personal process. You first have to identify the researcher that would be interested in what you would like to study in, and you have to discuss with him the topic of discussion. This is also a good way to work together on a good proposal, on something that would be really filling the gap of the research and adding the innovation. So it can be seen as more work to do before, but it's actually a way to discuss and to see where your research topic would be very relevant within the state of art of the research in the field. So yeah, you have to usually write a PhD proposal, some abstract and some methodology, and to discuss this with the supervisor. In all of the case, you also need to be in contact with the doctoral schools for the administrative part from A to Z as well. As well, I wanted to show you a picture about the different ways as a foreigner in France to do PhD studies. Of course, you have the simple PhD. No PhD is simple, of course, but this is just the most simple administrative way to do PhD is basically to find your PhD supervisor in France and to conduct your whole PhD in France, and you receive one diploma from France. But there is also this possibility to do the co-tutelle. So co-tutelle basically means that you have two supervisors, one from your home university and from the host university in France. And you will get either at the end one diploma with the mentioning of the two universities or two separate diplomas. And the completion of the two PhD mentions or two degrees is based on the mobility. So that's the case where you would be looking for actually a scholarship, and we will tell you about the scholarship for mobility programs within PhD to enable you to do this kind of co-tutelle program. So basically you would do like 1 year in France, 1 year in your home country, and 1 year in France, or vice versa. But this has also to include that your home university and the host university has a bilateral cooperation and a convention for this. So this is not an obstacle. You can also be the initiator of a convention between two universities, but you have to pay attention to this. And it also means that you have to be enrolled administratively to the two universities, so you have to pay the fees in both institutions. But you will see that in France it's quite competitive fees in general. And when it comes to co-direction, this is the same principle as the co-tutelle, but you're actually enrolled in a single university, and at the you have two director of thesis, but at the end you only get one diploma mentioning one university. It just mentions that you have your supervisor also from the host from the home university, but at the end you only get one diploma. There is also something in France that is very particular, is that you can also do PhD with the private sector. This is something that can be quite interesting, notably in the field of technology, innovation. If you find a company that is, private company that is working in the field of your topic of interest, this is something that can be quite useful. But this is also not the most common way to do PhD, but I wanted to share the information that it actually exists. Basically, it means that you will conduct a PhD while being employed by a private company that is involved in innovation, that is already working with some public research institution or public lab. And there is an administrative framework in France with the CIFRE convention to organize this. It has the advantage for you to get both experience in the private and the public funded innovation. And also the average salary is sometimes a little bit higher than if you are only working for the public institution. all of this information I will, of course, be able to provide you, because I put some link about some useful tools. There is, for example, this ScanAir tool. It is mostly in French, but you can find also some elements in English. But anyways, if you find, if you are looking for some institution that worked, for example, on the studies of phthalate, for example, it will enable you to get the list of all the research institutions that are working on this issue currently, but also private sector, like smaller SMEs, or also bigger companies that are actually doing research on this topic. So that can be a way for you to find proper institution for the research institution, but also to see who is involved in France from the private sector in the same field of innovation and research. When it comes to funding and the fees, when you are involved in a PhD program at the French universities, the annual fee is 391 euros, and it is the same if you are a foreign student or a French student. There is no difference. The majority of PhD students in France are already funded. They are actually already, you are admitted as within a doctoral contract, which means that you would have some activities either as a research assistant or sometimes a teaching assistant as well. It depends on the funding that the university has for you to be involved. So usually a doctoral contract with the universities, the average salary will be 1,400 per month. Then with research institutions like CNRS or CNES. CNES is the Center for the Space Research. CNRS is a more global for scientific research national center. CA is involved in the physics and nuclear, not only programs. It's relatively the same. Of course, you have many opportunities to get funded through by a French university through European schemes, or also direct funding from the National Research Agency in France. So this kind of programs, usually the study offers, you can actually find them directly online, and we have a tool. We actually brought some brochure that you can bring with you that has this all these links displayed, where all the PhD and postdocs in this type of frameworks are actually published every I mean on a daily basis. Most of them are related to the exact and natural science, because as I told you, most of the time in this field you have to apply directly to a topic, whereas with social sciences you have to discuss and find the funding with the supervisor. Yes, and of course there is also the possibility to get support for a mobility program in the case of co-tutelle, or also PhD scholarships from your government as well. We have actually also in France new programs. This is the program for anything related to climate change, environmental studies, but I have to say it's multidisciplinary. It's not only for exact and natural sciences, it's all fields of studies related to this topic. So, for example, energetic transition, if you are dealing with economics in this field, this also includes, these are research grants and mobility grants that were created after actually the election of the current US president, who has cut some funding for foreign students to come to the US and for the research in this field of studies. So the President Macron has launched these programs of Make Our Planet Great Again. So to make the remark after the Make America Great Again. And there is a national initiative and priority to sustain all the research in these fields, and there will be a new call for the next year for this program. And we also have our Excellency French Eiffel program, named after our famous Eiffel Tower. And you know, Eiffel Tower has the name of the engineer Eiffel, who actually has built many infrastructure in this style in the world at the beginning of the 20th century. So this program is actually very interesting for PhD if you are in the framework of the co-tutelle. So if you are already enrolled in your home university here and you would like to do doctoral mobility, it is for 10 months and the scholarship is 1,400 euro per month. But attention, you have to actually, it is the host university in France that has to do the submission for you. So it really means that you have to be involved in the co-tutelle scheme with a bilateral convention between your university. This is the deadline for the host university to submit, but of course all the work prior needs to be done away months in advance.